Hey, what's up everyone? This is Urgo Josh, and today we are going to work on a drawing, an animated stylized sketch drawing from a reference. The goal is for me to take you through every single step and thought and decision that I make in order to draw something that's cool and not just copy exactly one for one and create something that's super realistic. What you're seeing me work on now is the process for a few of these other sketches I did before and after, just as practice. So I think you're going to get a lot of great tips from this video if you choose to follow along, or if you just choose to watch and listen. It's pretty rare to see videos like this that are so in-depth online because honestly, no matter how good you get, it's really hard to draw and talk at the same time for most people. So with that being said, please hit the like button if you get any value out of this. It'll really help more people see it and also support the channel so I can make more videos. If you're wondering what I have here on the left that I'm using to view these references, it's an app called VizRef. I won't be using it in the video, I just have it here to show you. And as for my brushes, I'm using my Ergo sketch brush pack here, and I'm using the Ergo Draw and the Ergo Tradition brushes, but I'm also using Ramon Nunez's brushes that I've imported into Procreate. He has his brushes available on his Patreon, and I'm using his Pencil O brush in particular. I love that brush. So, of course, I'm drawing in Procreate, my favorite drawing app. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the drawing. We're going to sketch this guy right here. This guy eating some bread. Is it like a strawberry cake bread thing? I don't know. If you know what it is, tell me in the comments. Let's start with the head shape. Like, I'm just going to do something pretty rough here. I don't do the circle thing because it's just, nobody's head is really a circle shape. It's not really a sphere. It's closer to a rectangular prism or cube or something. So I'm just going to roughly get in the angle here. I think I'll start with a vertical line to represent the tilt of the head, and then just do that to represent the hairline. And now I'm just going to go straight into the eyes so I can capture the expression from here, because I just don't want to stress myself out trying to structure and plan the head shape so much. I really like drawing at angles like this because it's pretty easy to get the eye shape because it's just a straight line and then a curved line below it, like this. And the goal of this is really just to relax and enjoy the drawing process and not really go for likeness so much. I find that gets in the way of my progress and learning. So I'm going to try my best to not erase and change things so much as well. Yeah, just getting the eyebrow shape in roughly. This initial rough sketch, instead of thinking about it like it doesn't mean anything, I'm trying to approach things now where it's something I stick to because those first lines have such a beautiful gesture and emotion to them. Just shrinking the eyes and shifting them a bit. But yeah, it has such a nice gesture and emotion to them that you don't want to lose. It doesn't make sense to change the drawing that much afterwards. At least that's what I'm trying to tell myself now, because it doesn't have to be perfect. And trying to get it perfect just makes it worse. So you might as well just relax a bit. Get the irises in here. Get some eyelids in. We're just trying to simplify it so that it's something that's really clear and recognizable. Just representing that thumb with a nice gestural curve like that is plenty. Getting the chin in and doing this curved line back into the cheek. And then I feel like his head is getting way too wide at the top. So I'm going to try to plan that out a bit. Get the ears in there. Just a curve. I notice they stop right along this line right here, if it's an imaginary line. So I'm going to erase that and just adjust it. This one really sticks out from the rest of his head, so try to accommodate for that. I'm just going to make this line straighter here because I feel like I'm going into catching details too much. But I do like how his cheek is kind of puffing out. So I want to have that in there. But I'm not trying to go for, yeah, I think that sells it better than how I had it before. And I'm noticing that space between his nose and his lip is way too long. And that's something I can fix pretty easily because we want to, yeah, this immediately makes it look more like he's looking down. Because then this really just goes right into the cheek there. I'm going to try to not look at the reference and capture, just imagine what this expression would look like in my head. Trying to make it look more like he's surprised, like looking off into the distance somewhere. And then for the hand shape, I'm just going to get some loose gestural curves to block it in. I'm thinking about trying to get it to be the right size overall. Getting like this little arc in there to represent the fingers curling above the palm of the hand. Then I'm thinking about the angle of the pinky and then the angle of the palm going outwards as two separate angles like that. And then the wrist can just go this way. I feel like this shape is a little bit too big, maybe? Possibly. I'm going to move the palm in a little bit. Right? Rotate it outwards like this. I think the pinky line is a bit too long. And then overall, it's like you see this stair step in height. So I'm just going to add that in there. Right? So I'm not even really thinking about the anatomy of the hand, just that gesture. And when you're doing stuff like this, I really feel like it helps you draw more efficiently in the future. You're still retaining some of the anatomy of what's going on because you're paying attention to the simplest parts and then slowly going into more and more detail. So like there's a concave indentation in the hand and I'm trying to block that out using the guidelines of the little creases in our hands right here. And you see that little shape like that. That's something I would add in there. For interest, his hand is looking super, super long. I'm noticing also this is more of a continual line in the reference. So I'm just going to do that. Just that quick stroke and erase it. So you can get that beautiful gesture in there. Now I'm also noticing the space here is a lot more than in the reference. And I'm debating, is that something I think is worth changing? The space here is also a lot more, and I think it is worth changing. It won't be that hard. I can just cut it right here at the joints and move it over. I think the drawing isn't looking, I'm going to shrink it a bit too. I think it still looks relatively loose and free. It doesn't look like it's been overworked and stressed too much. I'm going to take an arc like that for the shirt since it's coming down from his chin. And then I know this one comes from the bottom of the ear. So then I'm just going to connect them. This angle here is looking pretty androgynous in my drawing, which is kind of the same as the reference. So there's no problem with that. And that's pretty cool. Sometimes I take drawings like this and I turn them into other characters and stuff by just making a few tweaks. And when you draw this simply and this straightforward, that becomes really easy. Noticing the head just feels really thick and the cheeks, it just feels very childlike and childish and young. But I don't think that's something I really want to worry about too much right now. I'll think about it later. I'll just start going into the shirt. I want to get that shoulder line here. Like that. I think maybe the size of the body will help clarify what I was concerned with before. Now I'm going to get that seam for the top of the shirt in here. I think this can be closer overall. I'm just going to use the liquify tool. Yeah, I'm starting to like this kind of like squarish body shape that's coming through. Let's get the arm. I got that bump in there. That's something that's pretty important to represent. Right, it's the, I believe that bone is the ulna. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the ulna comes out on the pinky side. So then you just do a curve like that. Now that arm, that wrist is way too thin, but it's okay. I'll just thicken that up a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfectly realistic. Just needs to kind of be consistent with the rest of the style. Now I want him to look more that way instead of this way, so I'm going to come back to the eyes. Eyes are a really important part of the drawing, no matter what style you're doing, so I'm going to bring the eyebrows down too, because I think that might help. Oh, that looks a little bit better to me. I'm just not getting that sense of like he's looking down at something, like someone's talking to him. Let's get that hairline in the right place. I tend to completely erase people's foreheads sometimes. I'm going to make the chin a bit bigger too. I think that'll help him look a little bit more, a bit less like a child. Yeah, I'm moving the eyelids down a little bit. Having the pupils in there could help. Yeah. Yeah, this is closer to what I wanted. Don't think those lines for the bridge of the nose are helping me that much. I'm gonna break his cheek into two curves, one for the cheekbone, one for the cheek, like that, instead of just one big line. I think that makes it look too youthful and childish as well. Maybe bringing his thumb down. It just feels lifeless to me right now. That looks better to me. Yeah, that line, if you remember Avatar, like there's so many expressions have this cross diagonal line for the mouth, and this guy immediately starts making me think of Sokka when I do this, and it just feels so much better to me. Like maybe I can personalize it a little bit by adding a little bit of the lip right there. That just, yeah, I'm much happier with that. You see how subtle this change is? Like just slightly rotating the nose too to suggest that it's being pushed up by his finger. Right? Like being able to interpret things like this from a reference is really what I'm looking to develop as a skill. It's so useful. And so now I'm going to try and deviate from the reference again and bring the eyebrows to a place that just looks aesthetic to me. And I'm thinking of a way to simplify these eyebrows instead of just drawing them exactly as they are. And usually I would get some reference of some other people's work to look at this. But I'm just going to try to break it down logically. So like the center of it is a lot darker than the edges. So what I could do, and then a lot of the lines in the eyebrows are arcs like this. So maybe I just do that and then add a few loose ones that are thinner on the edges. I think sometimes that's all you need to really get a message across. Yeah. I wonder how it would look if I filled in the eyes like this completely. I think I prefer this, but I want to try changing his expression to look more upwards. Like he's like, huh? I wasn't listening to you over the taste of this awesome strawberry cake sandwich. Yeah. Okay. I'll leave that there for now. I don't want to. Oh, he looks a little bit cross-eyed. I always do this. Okay. All right, that's better. So now I really like this fold in the shirt, so I'm going to emphasize that. Now I think let's try and add the rest of the shoulder here. That works for me. Yeah. And then this hand, ooh, this hand is harder for me because the fingers are all together. So I'm going to go again and go for a loose shape so that I can get a feel for the proportions and the size. Yeah, basically the same thing. Now this is what I would call like a loose sketch. Like these lines aren't necessarily something I want to keep, but they're helping guide me with the drawing. These lines are definitely things I will keep. They're not helping for a more refined version. If I try to refine this, it's going to look worse. Like no matter what I do, if I try to get like an ink brush or something, it's just going to look worse. What I'll do is add more fine details onto it with one of my finer brushes, like I did here, right? Like you see some of these shadows, right? Emphasizing certain lines. That's what I'll do on top of it. But I'm not going to undo and just, you know, reduce the opacity and do a new version. Like, no. We're not doing that. Because I fought with that for years and it's not worth it. Trust me. I see the pinky line makes that curve here. And then I think this is called the index finger is here. So like, you see how simple this gesture is? The two fingers are here. Then there's a curve for the pinky. And then this one stops right about the same distance right there. So that tells me enough. And then I'm going to use an arc to represent all of the knuckles, but I need to guess the distance of where that would be first. I think it'd be something like this. And then there's this, what would you call that shape? I don't know. It's like a cone shape. Yeah, literally is like a cone shape because you could just do that. So that cone shape is going to represent everything from the wrist to where the knuckles are. Except the pinky has a little bit more muscle here, so I'm going to draw a curve there, and then just do that. You see, again, where the ulna is, this little bump here is just represented by a curve like that. So after drawing all that, I see it looks a little small, but I'm going to go in and just loosely draw some lines to separate the fingers. Do a little triangle shape to represent the bend of the upper of the index finger here. I like to do little curves like that for the joints of the digits. And then a little curve like that going inward for the fold of skin as the finger joins into the knuckle. And then one line here for the major joint change, and then another one. So typically when I draw fingers, I don't think of them as three joints like this, like they are in reality. I tend to think of them more slightly tapered, usually one edge is more curved, and then there's a main joint here. And then if there's more detail to be shown, like in this hand, then I'll think about cutting that slightly off more in one direction instead of just perfectly in half. I guess, no, in half would work pretty well. So like this finger looks pretty good, right? And so that's how I'll think of it slowly as a progression. But I'm liking this overall shape, but I feel like it's a little small, especially since this hand is closer to us. So I'm just going to select that really well. So you won't even, this isn't going to agitate or stress the drawing too much at all. And I'll just increase the size like that. And before we finish the selection, I'm thinking about that piece of bread. So I'm going to reduce the size a little bit. I'm changing the size more on a stylistic choice basis. And we want the knuckle for the index finger to be slightly above this crease here. So I think that's a good spot, and that leaves me enough space to draw. Nope, I changed my mind because it's getting too far away from the rest of his body. So we'll just leave it like that because we want to make a good looking drawing more than just representing the reference perfectly. The table is at an angle like this. I'll go ahead and move this guy over to the side. Now we've done like the hardest part. of the drawing. Like we've got the hands in there, we've got the face in there, right? I'm noticing that the proportion of the head to the rest of the body is not the same as the reference. It could be improved, but those are things I'm not going to stress about right now. I think those types of adjustments are better gained through practice. It's not something to stress about. So I'm drawing a straight line here because you can tell in the reference, and it is in reality, that your forearm is really, really pretty much identical to this shape in cross section with just a little bit of deviance like that. Your forearms are really not just like cylinders. So for example, here, this is like the flat area underneath the forearm like that. And I'm going to leave that line there because that could be helpful for shading later. And I'll join it up there with that little shadow that we can see in the reference. So I'm going to add in this nice little crease here that we see in the shirt. And then do another loose shadow shape for the crease there. And try to understand this one as well. We don't want to copy it exactly because we don't need to capture the level of detail that's in the reference. We just need to show that, hey, this is a really big oversized loose shirt, right? So I do heavier lines for when there's actual distance between the crease of the shirt and the next part, and then really light lines to suggest the more subtle changes, right? Like that. And then for the rest of the shoulder here, this is a hard crease in the shirt's material. I'll just extend that a little bit more. That way, we're moving into parts that are not going to be the focal point anymore. So I'm going to be even more loose than I was before. That's maybe a few too many lines. We want to focus where we put the creases. I'm going to draw the bread after I get the lines in there, but now I'm just free flowing with the arm. I want to get some of these creases in there too, real quick. A little bump for that. That should be enough. And I'm just going to go with what feels right for the size of the arm. Like that. Just erase the extra stuff there. So I'm really happy with this so far. Now, let's go in and add some of the details to the fingers here. And so since we're happy with the shapes, we just need to take our time and make decisions that are going to look good. Let me just quickly draw a little circle for his watch. Spending a little time on things like that with really loose sketches like this, I think, are really important. There's too much value to pass up on for how much better it can make the overall drawing. So for this finger, what I'm thinking of, right, is like, oh, let me get in here and really show the indentation of the bones and slightly angle that finger up. And that actually doesn't look too bad, but it's not really necessary. But since I did it anyway, I'm going to keep it there. I'm just going to do that U shape, right, for the nail and do a little bit of space to show that his nail is trimmed. And that little tiny detail just makes, it's like you give a little anchor for your brain to imagine everything else, and it will look better than if you try to really get in there and do it perfectly. I'll do another line for the cuticle creases or whatever. Make this a little bit of a, I think I might leave that straight, but I'm noticing there's very little space between the knuckle here and where the edge of the hand is. And so I'm going to do this. That's a little bit too curvy. Just not something I usually say, but there you go. I'm going to get this curve in there and just keep that line straight and simple. I'm starting to think that maybe the way I had it in the beginning was better. Looks a little bit more believable. Part of me wants to put like the thumb, make it a little bit more visible so that it's easier to understand. what we're looking at. I think I'm going to leave that way. That's a bit of artistic liberty right there. And I use the location of where I put the fingernails to help show the perspective of the fingers, instead of trying to represent the fingers as these perfect 3D fingers that have a top, side, and bottom, right? You can just, like, you could do this and get the fingernail in there. But I think just letting the subtle curves in the fingers and the fingernails themselves do that for you is really, really helpful. I'm noticing his knuckle is a little bit lower than that. Well, there's a part of me that likes how this looks, and I'm just going to leave this upper part of his finger longer. I don't know. Maybe some of you will see this as super glaringly obvious and atrocious, but I like that. And doing these little curves to show the shadows in between are appealing to me as well. And so really, we did a lot of the work figuring out the fingers already. There's a clear thinning of the pinky here. I'm going to bring that down. And then you see that. And so okay, I'm going to change that a little bit. Now it's starting to look a little bit too much. Something I want to call your attention to now is look at how every single line is quick and gestural and carries so much energy. That's what makes sketches like this look really good. Every single line, right? Like, we're not doing this, which isn't a bad thing, but if you want to get this animated style that looks good, that makes people, there's just something about sketches like this where every single line looks like a graceful ballerina flowing in the wind like this. People love it, and I love it. And it's because I think it's just every single part of the drawing is fun and enjoyable to look at, and it's graceful. It just carries itself. I think it does so much without you having to really think about what you're doing. So, like, even making that crease for the temple right here. I'm going to draw a loose line here for the shadow. Make that a little bit lighter. Getting into the hairline. There's a lot less space up here than I had. Whoa, there was a lot of space in between the edge of the hairline here and the eyebrow. I'm going to make this a more concave curve, and the head gets a little bit bigger than that. So I like this approach for drawing, because if I were to try to draw the head first perfectly, I wouldn't have given myself the freedom to make these adjustments. It would have stressed me out. When people are looking down, their heads are surprisingly a lot bigger than you would think. I might get rid of this line because it's starting to make him look really old. Which isn't a bad thing. It's just not what I'm going for. Okay. Pretty happy with that. I'm still not happy with the eyes. I'm debating on just redoing them completely. So what I would do at this stage is just duplicate the entire drawing, keep the other one as a backup, and just erase it and redo it. We're not tracing over, we're making a new drawing, which is always going to have, it's just going to be different, but a fresh new drawing has just as much value as the other drawing because it's fresh. And with the context of the rest of the fingers and everything laid out, sometimes it's easier to show what you want. Now, I made his eyes a bit too big. Remember what I said about bigger eyes? It's like, you don't want to do that unless you're trying to make the character look hyper feminine or exaggerate feminine qualities or make them look very youthful and cute. I'm going to shrink them a bit. By the way, the size of this canvas is a 4K UHD canvas, so 3840 by 2160 pixels. I find that with doing sketches like this, I don't want to do like those big 5,000 pixel canvases like I normally do. At least not to start out with those. Using less pixels gives you that same natural benefit of reducing your options. So when you reduce options and you reduce complexity, more creativity tends to come out naturally without you having to try to do it. And I find just reducing the amount of pixels gives me that effect as well. And so what I would do is if I wanted to make this a full scene drawing, I would just continue to increase the canvas size and push up and down, left and right. And then I might end up with a 5,000 by 5,000 pixel canvas, but I won't start out with that. So this is the expression I was looking for. Maybe somebody, I'd love to see what you guys think in terms of describing this expression, but yeah, it's just perfect. Yes. Yeah. This matters so much. This is what AI really struggles to create on its own. Okay, so now let's get these fingers in. I've been looking forward to this part. So I'm going to be very gestural here. Get me some very bold and sharp lines. That looks good. Here we do want to pay attention to the perspective of the fingers a bit more. So I'm getting that curve, that nice fold in there. But I want to pay attention to the fact that the top of the finger is like that, and then we have the side. I'm not just going to do this flat shape and then put the finger on it that's directly facing us. No, that doesn't look good. So I'm going to draw the nail like this, and then get this curve in there, like that. This one is coming outwards more than it is in the reference, but I like it. So we'll leave it that way. Get that little triangle in there to represent the space. It's not exactly like the reference again, but it shows what we need to show. And that's what matters. That's a little bit not in the perspective I want. We'll have a happy medium there. This finger is going straight down, and it goes down a little bit before, it doesn't go down as far as the ring finger here. And so we're really zoomed in here because there's a good amount of detail to show, but we've done so much of the planning already that it's okay. Usually zooming in is not something you want to be doing like that. I'm already sensing though that we're going to need to increase the size of the fingers. They look a little small. But again, getting the gesture, getting the overall shape and perspective in is so much more important than just getting the perfect size right. You can always change that because it's digital art. Nice. That is nowhere near the same exact placement or angle as the reference, but it's cool. And it was the first thing I drew. And so that's what we want. So the fingers, I feel like, are just slightly too small on average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully select them and play with the size a bit. Slightly increase. That looks pretty good to me. I'm noticing that this finger, though, really tucks in a lot more, and it helps with the gesture. So I'm going to go back on what I said and adjust it to be a little bit more hidden. And shrink the size a bit. It's not too difficult of a change to make. I can just erase that line and this one. Yeah, I like how it's like this one is tucked behind and the fingers over here are stretched out. So if I were to draw a line for the gesture of those fingers, it would be tucked in and then flaring out like this. And then this one's like tucked in really tight and hidden in the corner. So that gesture is what I want. And that will look like good anatomy. That will give you the same, if not better, impression than trying to nail the anatomy perfectly. I always love like bigger elbows just coming out of nowhere in these types of drawings. I'm also noticing there's a lot more clothing on this side. And we've also got the crease that comes down. So I'm gonna draw over that because that is part of this character's look, like just this giant shirt that they're wearing, like that. And there we go. Now let's draw the bread. So there's a straight line like this. I'm gonna gently erase that crease. Do very simplified, cartoony chew marks or bite marks. Like that. Get the bread crust in there. A little bit of an indentation from impressing it. Probably do a couple of little spots to represent some of the porous holes in the bread, and a couple lines on the corners to show that it has depth in 3D. You know, like you can see a little bit of the top surface that has been cut by the teeth. The bread is looking a bit small. I might just increase the size a bit, just as a more artistic decision to make it feel like it belongs as part of the drawing. Even though, oh, this works out. The distance from the bread to the chin is almost the exact same as in the reference. So you see how we were worried about like getting that hand placement perfect before? That's a mistake I've made a lot in the past. And by just leaving it, we ended up getting the bread looking just fine here. We can draw the crease like that. Like just adding this crease of the bread crust suggests that he's really gripping it, right? And that helps sell it really well. So now, what I'm going to do is let's do a loose ellipse for the plate. Now this is a bit of a weakness of mine. I have very little patience for getting the perspective right for things like this. But it's a little bit more important to try and get. The more man-made and technical something is, the more you actually do want to spend time making sure that the perspective and the angles are right. Like food is a little bit important for that too, not as much, but then when it comes to people, you can really play with the shapes. So here, I don't know why, I just feel like doing something like this, where the bread is curved up like this. I feel like it just helps with the path the viewer will take, and I can show some of the strawberry a little bit more. So we're just drawing, this is like a perspective exercise where you're just drawing a rectangular prism. It's easy. Then you can draw those loose heart shapes for the strawberries, taking care that they, look like they're in the right perspective. It's one of the things I love about this brush. You naturally get that thickness right there just by varying your line weight. Drawing effective, animated, and stylized things is so heavily dependent on maximum efficiency, which comes naturally more than you would think. Drawing a little bit of a line inside them to represent that whitish stem of where the strawberry is. And a little bit of a crease there for the sandwich. I'm going to rotate this so I can get a good line for the edge of this plate. There we go. Cool. So I'm going to take a bit of a break now and then come back and refine this a little bit and show you how I do that with my Ergo Draw or Tradition brushes. All right, so we are back, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer again because we're going to try a few things. I spent some time trying to figure out and make some decisions early for what kind of details we're going to incorporate here. But you really can't do that well. It's best just to experiment. In the meantime, I also found out that this reference has been drawn a lot. So that's good. Hopefully more of you want to draw along with me for this. But something I realized I wanted to do is to make this eyebrow more expressive. So I am slowly changing the shape of it. I'm also going to get an eraser that's a little bit more opaque and sharp. Let's see what I have in my sketch brush pack. I'm going to use this pencil-y pen brush. Yeah, something that will really help me sculpt some of the lines, since we're going to be I'm going to go a lot darker here. So I'm filling this pupil in, and I'm not sure if he's kind of looking off to the side instead of like up. So I'm going to try and see what will happen if I prioritize him looking up to the side. I actually think that looks fine. Let's just stick with that. So I'll get a nice bold line for the eyelashes. The eyes, we're not just coming back to the eyes because we're starting over. We're coming back to the eyes because that's the focal point. And we're not starting over, we're just adding more bold details, right? So yeah, I want to make this line, this eyebrow a little bit more expressive here. Like that. I also want to darken up the inner corners to suggest that there's some shadow. Like so. And I think I'm going to add a few eyelashes as well to the bottom eyelid. Just a few of them. Make them really short, almost like dots. Add a few lashes there. Make that crease a little bit bolder as well. Yeah, this looks a little odd. Okay, that's better. We don't want the eyebrow hairs near the edges to be too dark. Okay, let's see. Let's add some detail to the ears. So we're going to add a little line there. I'm going to make the overall outlines for things a bit darker too. That helps things feel finished. So like especially for the head and hair, add a few extra lines for the hair here. And kind of disappear some of these hard edges to give a better sense of the hair. But I don't want to use too many lines and start shading. We want to kind of focus the detail from the center and move outwards. So it's slowly becoming less and less detail as we move away from the focal point. I'm going to keep the stylized lip, but I'm going to test out making his thumb a bit more visible like that. I think I like that. Adding more shadow there. Let's leave it light and then add the shadow in this corner, where the corner of his mouth is. No, because we want it to look like it's tight against the skin. I'll just leave it like that. It's really easy to mess up the drawing you had underneath at this step, so it's good to be patient and to think about what you're doing. You'll get faster again over time. It's good to practice being fast, but I think that should be, I don't think it's good to practice speed alongside other things. I think speed is one of those things that will mess up your ability to properly absorb other lessons if that's what your focus is. Adding that little shadow in the corner for the shirt helps us understand what's going on here. And I'm going to darken this line as well, because this is the edge where the shirt stops. And so that line will suggest a shadow there for us, along with, I think, a line there to separate the head. But we don't have to have the head, like, have all the lines of the head bold, especially because you want to think about the transition, right? So there's this intersection here, so I like to make that bold. But the cheek is soft and coming out, and it's overlapping his neck, so I'm going to leave that like that. I'm going to come back in, though, and make some parts of the shirt bold. Now, what's really good to do here is to see, even though it's a much darker line, the thickness and the thinness of it is something I naturally manipulate because of the tilt of the pen. So that is going to help us keep the natural loose vibe of the outline without mess, while also starting to sharpen up the drawing so it looks more finished. Like that. Just making up how the shirt looks at this end over here. So for the hands, this line I think is taking away a little bit. It's a bit confusing. So now I'm going to bold up the hand. Really being careful with the lines I select. I'm not going through with a single value line, and I can't even do that because this brush is so good. But I'm not going through and doing this, right? Like, if I do that, that's kind of its own style. I'm going in and just really making it clear what kind of decisions I had. You see that line was too thick there, so I changed the angle of my pen. And I'm going to emphasize those darker lines here so that the fingers really do look separate from the rest of the palm. So that's looking good. I'm staying zoomed out as often as I can to make sure I don't overdo things. Get a little bit of a shadow between those fingers. There's a lot of darkness in this area and here. I'm going to make a crease there. Emphasize those lines. It's looking a little too thick. Let's reduce the brush size. Come back in like this. And what you'll notice about this step is it's going to be relatively quick because we did so much of the work. And especially if you want to color this, you don't want to go in and refine too many things. So for example, I'm not going to draw any lines for the creases of the lower eyelids, right? That would be something I would show with shading. I'm going to clean up the nose a bit more here. And let me see if I want to show a little bit of that. That isn't visible in the reference. See how that looks compared to the previous version. Yeah, I'm liking it. It looks a lot more finished. I am thinking though, do I want to just keep that thin? I think this has a little bit more energy. Yeah. There's a little bit of a mark on his face. I think that would add a little bit of character. I'll lightly add something there. Those crease lines I think are fine. I don't want to add too much detail there. Let's figure out the silhouette for these fingers, though. I think that's important. We don't want to go too dark with them. We just want to make it clear where the boundaries are. Zooming out, you can kind of just, if you squint your eyes a little bit, not to where everything is blurry, but just a little bit, you can kind of feel the lines slowly getting darker or fading out, and then you get a feel for where it would be best to add a darker line to support that gentle change in line density. This hand, we definitely want some harsher, some darker lines. I'm going to let this finger overlap the middle finger. So I'm going to erase that. And there's a lot of shadow here. So I'm going to let some thinner, dark lines. Suggest that right here, letting them taper out that way. Just adjusting the shape of that part of the arm a bit more as well. I didn't get around to drawing the watch, so let's add that here. with this brush. I noticed the edge of the watch has those rounded segments. And then let's get the edge of the watch in as well. A couple lines for the gloss and the chamfers. And then we're really going to try to make this shadow really bold. Because of the way I drew this, we're going to have to come up with the rest of the way the watch is connecting to his wrist. So in order to make that look more natural, be a good idea to get a reference for a watch, but I'm wearing one right now, so that seems to be good enough. And I'm not going to go in as far as like to draw all the numbers and everything. Just going to zoom out and kind of scribble there. Do a light thin line for the fabric of the shirt, and then do something like that to suggest that that's where it's terminating there. Again, he's wearing a really baggy top, so I'm going to leave it like that. This line can be fairly bold because it's pretty dark underneath his arm there, and that separates it from the surface of a shirt pretty well. My finger is looking a little bit too thin, so I'm going to add a darker line here and let the other line I drew serve as like a shadow shape and fade it out into the rest of the finger. I think I'm going to define the edge of the hand there, but I'm also going to emphasize and commit to that thumb that I'm letting show. I think that makes the hand look a lot better than it does if I were to keep it exactly like the reference. I'm going to do some loose lines for the top of his head here, just to give it a little bit of texture and some subtle identification of where the shading is. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I feel like another line there would be good, but then you get that weird tangent. This area would be in shadow, but I'm going to leave a light line there because it looks a little bit better as a drawing with that line there, but I don't think I'd need it if I were to shade this. And when it comes to details like the pattern and the bowl, that's something I think would look a lot better if it were just painted in. So I'm just going to loosely indicate what's going on with the lines here. Add some more little pit marks to indicate the porosity of the bread. Emphasize the lines here a bit more. Increase the brush size to get that shadow in for the plate. And then let's go ahead and make the table line bolder. Yeah. And really separate the plate from everything else. I want the hand to really stand out above the food on the plate. The arm holding the hand that's in his mouth. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to thin it out a bit. Just redraw that line. So yeah, I think this drawing ended up being a lot tighter, and I think would be ready for coloring compared to this one is a lot looser than the one I did yesterday. But this still feels, I think, plenty loose and not overworked to death. Something I just realized though is I haven't flipped the canvas for this, but when you flip the canvas, it always looks bad because you're not used to it, right? If you flip a photo of yourself, you're probably not going to like it, but let's do it. It's going to look bad for all of us because we've been looking at it this way the whole time. But I actually am happy with that. It doesn't look terrible. This looks fine. But this area kind of feels empty, like it's not, oh, we forgot about the drink. I don't really feel like drawing the drink. Let's see if I can at least get the shape in there. Got a bit of shiny bits to it for the rim of the glass. Something that would be better shown with the shading. Since we're not AI, we can draw it more than just half full, right? That really does make the drawing feel a lot more complete. I'm glad even though it was sloppy, I'm glad we put in the effort to add it in there. And then we could just add the decorations, the flower pattern pretty easily. Again, I would recommend doing something from imagination or looking at something a little bit simpler You don't have to go in and replicate it exactly. The key is to still keep it looking loose and not super robotic and refined. Like, you don't want suddenly certain things to look like you used a 3D model. Not that using a 3D model is bad, but it shouldn't look out of place like a lot of the first anime that started using 3D models a few years back did. And with that, I think we're good here. I think we're done. If you want to, you can go add the shadows in here and some flats and you'd be good to go. I hope you had a great time drawing along with me today and studying this. I think a lot of you would find this really valuable, even though it's going to be a very long video, because this is just how it is when you film yourself drawing and explain everything as you go. Let me know if this helped you and if there's any questions you had or what you'd really want to see me do next, if you want to see me do this type of video again in the future. And I will see you in the next one. Keep drawing and stay balanced. Peace.